Glad that you're here with us because during the Christmas season, I think one of the things that we don't get to do that we're really meant to do, in fact, there's this portion of Christmas called Advent, which is the lead up to Christmas, and it's the preparation for Christmas and receiving the real meaning of Christmas. Jesus actually wasn't born in December-ish, maybe more in the springtime-ish. But I like that it's here because what it does and what it's meant to do is really prepare in our hearts a renewed sense of hope. Right? A renewed sense of hope. Because by the time our world gets to December, or maybe even in your own life, by the time we get to December and we look back on our previous year, unfortunately, and for many, there's a lot of great things that you accomplished and that happened, but for many there's also looking back and there's a whole lot of regret and disappointment and things that you were hoping for, but they kind of got stalled out, or maybe even they took some steps backwards or regressed a little bit. You know, you were really hoping for something to happen in your kid's life or their life to change, and instead of taking steps forward, it seems like they took some steps backward. I've got some college students in my home, and I know my college students right now, after this is November. By the time you get to November, you're starting to run out of gas, and you're just fighting to make it to the end, right? And you look back, and my semester didn't go quite the way that I wanted it to. And some people, they're actually even now running out of money, and so they're like, okay, how am I even going to continue? So there's some disappointment and some fear, and some hope is draining. And our souls need hope. That's like the fuel, like a car needs gas. Our souls need hope. It's that anticipation of a better present than our future. And so, or a better future than our present situation right now. We need that to fuel ourselves. For some people, it's relationships that they hope to get reconciled or to move forward. And instead of moving forward, they move back. And I know for a lot of people, it's their job situation. You know, they had a job and they were advancing in their career and they were hoping for great things in their job, and maybe they lost a job or they got passed over for a promotion. So as they look at their future, there's a little bit of a lack. There's a disappointment. There's a longing, a yearning, a need for hope. But the year has kind of drained that hope. And Christmas is a powerful reminder that we actually have good reason to have a hope. We have good reason to have hope. So hope is not just this, I don't understand it, or faith is not just, I don't understand it, and so I believe it. Faith and hope, they're actually based on reasons for it. The reasons alone can't give it to us, but they're based on reasons for it. And Christmas is this time that gives us incredible reason to hope. And so David describes this feeling that sometimes we have in our soul, and in Psalm 42 he says this, "Why, my soul, are you downcast?" I love this, that he has a conversation with himself. And actually, this is not David, this is just one of the psalmists. They wrote songs in the book of Psalms. And in Psalms he says, "Why are you downcast, my soul? Why are you so disturbed within me?" And then he speaks to his soul in this condition, and he says this, "Put your hope in God." This is something, soul, you've got to do, is place your hope in God. Not in your job or your boss or your ability to make finances or your relationships or your spouse or anything else, but put your hope, actively take steps to put your hope in God. And you and I have really great reason to do that. And the Christmas story helps us just begin to understand the reason that we have to hope in God. And you and I have incredible reason to hope in God. This morning, as we're talking about this, I want to just kind of frame what we're going to talk about this morning with this question as we're thinking about this. Here's the question. What happens in your life when it isn't moving in the direction of your plans? What happens? Right? You ever had that situation where you have certain things planned out? Maybe for some of you just to exercise and to get better health. Your doctor told you need to do that. And now it's December and you go, man, I haven't done anything yet. Well, what happens when your life isn't moving in the direction that you planned? Or here's another question. What happens when, the timing of something happening in your life is not the same as God's timing? What happens? What happens? It gets hard at those moments. It gets hard at those junctures. But the Christmas story is an incredible story that gives us a reason to have hope, to put our hope in God, even when it doesn't seem like our life is moving in the direction of our plans, and even when things are not happening according to your timetable, right? Some of you, this is the year I'm going to have a relationship, I'm going to find that significant other, and the year goes by and you're still going like, where is that person? And you're tempted to, and I think the temptation for all of us is to kind of back away from God a little bit. It's to back away from God. It's to hope just a little bit less. It's not that we don't believe. It's just that we start hoping a little bit less. We start taking things into our own hands. And oftentimes people just slowly drift away from God. You know, maybe you know somebody like that. Maybe you're somebody like that, and you're back in church, which is a good thing. It's a great place to find hope. But you know somebody goes, I used to go to church. I used to believe and have hope in God, but something happened along the way, and slowly, they begin to drift. And the Christmas story, and what we're going to talk about today, is just so incredible and gives us such great reason to hope in God, So I'm going to look at this. Now, many of us, and I would say probably most people, think that the Christmas story begins with the angels coming to a bunch of shepherds and announcing that a Savior has been born in Bethlehem, right? That's what we typically think about when we think about the beginning of the Christmas story. Or we think about, a man and a woman, they're looking for a place to have, the woman is pregnant, she's about to have a baby, and there's no room for her in the inn, so they're looking for a place to have this child. But listen to this is really interesting, and this is our reason for hope. The Christmas story actually begins about 2,000 years earlier than that. 2,000 years earlier. That's a long time. 2,000 years earlier, when God makes a promise to a man named Abraham. This is actually when the Christmas story begins. And the reason why he makes this promise is because in the beginning, God created this good world, and then God gave humanity the responsibility of ruling over this good world. But all of humanity decided to rebel against God. And as we rebelled against God, the world became more violent, and the world became more filled with death. And there was just giant downward spiral to this day, which is, if you look at the world and go, why is there all this stuff going on? Well, the reason why is because we rebelled against God, and there's this downward spiral. But God didn't give up on us. And so 2,000 years ago, he appears to this guy named Abram, and I'm going to call him Abraham because his name eventually changes to Abraham, and he makes this unbelievable, impossible promise to Abraham. And this is how it begins. The Lord said to Abraham, as we're going to call him because that's his name, "Go from your country and your people and your father's household to the land that I will show you." Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land that I'm going to show you. Now think about this, because I think we tend to glamorize the Bible. This was a really crazy period of time. In fact, this was a really dangerous time to be away from your family, your people, your country, and to be all alone. And God asks him to do a thing that is really dangerous. Give up your security and your comfort. Move away from your people, your tribe, your group, and go out on your own. And I'm not going to tell you where I want you to go. I just want you to follow me, and when you get there, then I'll tell you you're there. So this is a really crazy, unbelievable thing for God to ask, and it's actually extremely dangerous for Abraham to do this thing, to go away from his people and his country and his father's household to a place where God was going to show him. But as the promise, and here's where the promises begin, and listen to this is amazing. God says to him, "I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you." Abraham, I'm going to make you a great nation. Now, what if you know about him? Maybe if you don't, I'm going to tell you real quick. What makes this promise really incredible is that Abraham at this time was 75 years old. And his wife was 65 years old, and they didn't have a child, not one. So when God said, "I'm going to make you a great nation," he's probably thinking, "I didn't even have a child. You got to, let's start there." And honestly, if I were 75 years old and God said, "Hey, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to give you a kid," I'd be like, "Can you bless the neighbor with that one?" 75, she's 65. They have no children, and God says, no, I'm going to make you a great nation, and I'm going to show my goodness on your life. And then he says this, "And your name will be great." In other words, other versions say, your name is going to be famous. Abraham, you're going to be famous all over the world. Everybody will know your name. And it's amazing that this has actually come true, because most people have heard at least a little portion of the name of Abraham. We know about Abraham. Abraham, you're going to be a great nation, and I will bless you, and your nation, you will be a blessing to other people. So here's a guy who doesn't have not a child, and God says to him, "I'm going to make you not just a great father of a family, I'm going to make a great nation." That means multitudes of people are going to come forth from you. And Abraham's probably going, "Okay, I know who you are, so I'm believing this thing. And then through you, I'm going to bless all the world. You will be a great blessing." Now, what's also interesting about this is that in this period of time, nations and people, they didn't bless each other. They didn't. They conquered each other, they plundered each other, they stole from each other, they actually enslaved each other, which happens all throughout history. Whenever a nation conquers another nation, they end up enslaving that other nation as a workforce. They do that, but they don't bless each other. But God says, I'm different. Through you and your family, I'm going to bless the entire world. I'm going to do something totally different. And then he says, and this is how you know that you can trust this. This is not just an empty promise. I'm going to be a part of your story, and I am going to be with you and bless you and make sure that this blessing happens, and nothing will deter it from happening. He says this, I will bless you, and I will bless those who bless you, and I'm going to curse those who curse you. In other words, Abraham, I'm going to be a part of your story. I'm going to be with you on this journey. I'm going to be with you to make sure that everything I promised to you will happen, and no nation, no people will in any way deter this from happening. And then he says, and all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. This is an amazing promise. So all the peoples of the earth, there's going to come a day when everybody will know your name. You will be famous in all the earth. And somehow, through your descendants, all the people on the earth. And can you imagine Abraham's going, but if I leave my family like you're asking, and if I leave my people, and if I leave my place, nobody's ever going to remember me. But God says, no. Not only will they remember you, but you will be famous in all the earth. And through you, all people groups, all tribes, all nations will be blessed. They will know the name of Abraham, and somehow they will be indirectly impacted by your family and what I'm going to do through you. That is amazing. And this all to a man who didn't even have a child. His wife was 65 years old. All to them. Abraham, though, he believed God. He believed God. He trusted that God was able to do what God said he was going to do. Now, in no ways is Abraham perfect in this thing, and I really want to highlight this because I think sometimes we feel like as followers of Christ, in order to have hope or faith, we've got to have this perfect hope or perfect faith. And the people that believe God, man, they had an imperfect hope and imperfect faith. But you know what they had? They had a perfect God who is faithful to do what he says he's going to do. And there are three big things I'm just going to tell you on the front end. God loves the world. He does. He loves us. In fact, let me make it more specific because I think sometimes we go, yeah, I understand how God loves the world. God actually loves you. I mean, he knows you. He knows your address. He knows where you live. He knows all the little things that you don't even know about yourself. That's how intimately he is involved in our lives. He loves us. And God is faithful. He is faithful. And God's timing is totally perfect. Totally perfect. Even though some of you are going like, there's no way God's timing could be perfect because what's happening right now couldn't be the worst timing than anything. Or how long has it been taking for this to happen and it's still not happening? I just want to encourage you, as we're going to see, God's timing is incredibly perfect. So God makes this incredible promise to Abraham, this story of blessing. And from this point on, things get kind of funky. So here's what happens. Abraham actually has to wait 25 years. Everybody say 25 years. It took me like 20 minutes longer than it normally does to get to church today. And I was getting anxious, right? If it takes like 2 minutes more for me to get my coffee at Starbucks, don't you start pacing? Like, did they forget it? How many of you? I know some of you. I see you going back and forth to the counter. They must have forgot about me. No, we just got about 5 other customers before you. You're in line. You ever see the guy that's in line in traffic? It's none of us, but it's the guy that's in line in traffic, and they're just like strategically moving in and out. And don't you love it when they get stuck in the line and you pass and you're like, right? But Abraham is incredibly patient, and he waits for 25 years. So the time that he has the child and God comes through, he is almost 100 years old. Dang! Sarah, bless her heart, she is almost 90 years old. She's a star, right? But at that age, God delivers on his promise, and they have this child. And then this child has another child. You can put up the family tree. Abraham and Sarah have a son named Isaac. Isaac has a son named Jacob. Now this is really interesting, and this is where it gets kind of dysfunctional. Jacob is actually the second-born son. The firstborn son whose name should be there is a guy named Esau. But Jacob was very deceitful and very sneaky, and he robbed his brother, his older brother, out of the right of order. And so he robbed the birthright from his older brother. And Mama helped. Mama conspired to help. This is really dysfunctional. In fact, if some of you are going, you know what, I've had a really hard year, my kids aren't moving in the same direction that I wanted them to go in. Some of you, you're going, my parents, they're just so this or that or the other. You look back in your adolescence and you're disappointed. Read the Bible. There are people who are more dysfunctional than you and I, and God uses them, and they will make you feel good about your own life. So somebody else's tragedy encourages us. Jacob, though, sneaks in and becomes the heir. And he has, and here's gets even weirder, he has 12 sons. One of them they really don't like. His name is Joseph. So here's what they do. When they're away from their daddy, they throw Joseph in a well, an empty well. And instead of killing him, they have mercy and they decide to sell him as a slave. Yeah. They sell him as a slave to these travelers that are running by. They go to Egypt and they bring Joseph to Egypt, and Joseph becomes this elevated position after thing that happens. God elevates him to like one of the highest positions of the land, and he ends up saving the Egyptian population and his own family. God uses him to save his own family because they're all dying of famine at this point. God uses this obscure situation to save his family. God is working, even though if you were to look at the story, you go, what is going on? God seems really quiet. He seems like nothing's happening. In fact, things look like they're getting a lot worse. And this is the tribe, this is the people that God was going to bless the entire world through. This guy's a slave in Egypt, but God uses that whole situation to save his family. And then they migrate to Egypt, and they become a great nation of people in Egypt. They become this huge family. Abraham has a family. The family becomes a nation, and then the nation becomes a nation of slaves. Now think about this. You can imagine these promises were told to generations and generations, and they all talked about the promise that God made to Abraham that somehow he was going to come back and redeem and restore everything that we had done in our disobedience to God. He was going to redeem it, he was going to restore it, he was going to save us from death and hell and violence and all the things that destroy our lives. And then they're slaves for over 400 years in Egypt. They're slaves. You can imagine the people going like, where's the promise? Where's God in this whole thing? He sure is quiet. They become a nation of slaves. But then God raises up this guy named Moses. Maybe some of you have heard his name before, Moses. And Moses comes and he leads the people out of slavery. And in the process, he does a lot of damage in Egypt. And God does a lot of damage in Egypt. Again, it's a violent time. The history of the Bible, it's filled with violence. On this side of Jesus and of this side of Christmas, we look back and we see all the violence, and it's hard to read sometimes. But that was the world that they lived in. And in this time when Moses came out, none of the Egyptians were feeling blessed by the descendants of Abraham. There was death and there was destruction. As they go and move toward the promised land, and a guy named Joshua leads them into the promised land, there are a group of people that are already living in the land that they're going to inherit. So as they go in, they have to fight them and push them out. The group was called the Canaanites. The Canaanites were not feeling blessed by the family of Abraham at this time. The Egyptians weren't blessed. The Canaanites weren't blessed. But God said, I'm going to bless all the nations. But nobody was feeling good or appreciating or wanting the family of Abraham to be around them, because wherever they were going, they were getting pushed out. And about 1,000 years after the promise was made to Abraham, this nation of people becomes a kingdom. It's called the Kingdom of Israel. Kingdom of Israel. Maybe you've heard that before. And the Kingdom of Israel has their first solid king, a guy named David. And David is a great king. He loves God, but he's a warrior king. So he conquers all the nations surrounding them, and there is this time of kind of peace when David is the king. He is the warrior king who subdues everybody, and there's this semblance of peace. And for the first time, the people of Abraham, this family, this tribe, this nation, this kingdom, now looks like they actually have the possibility of being a blessing to other people. After King David comes, his son succeeds him. His name is Solomon. Solomon is this wise king, and he's this builder king. He has so much wisdom, and he's so knowledgeable about all these things that Solomon builds this incredible temple for God. In fact, people come from all the other countries to observe what he's built and to just marvel over his wisdom and to look at the opulence and the wealth of Israel and the kingdom of Israel. So before they looked like they had an opportunity, but now they really look like, man, we've got power, we've got influence, we've got wealth, there's wisdom coming out of Israel, and they look like they have an opportunity to actually be a blessing to all the world. All the world. But Solomon does something that God told him not to. And God is going to fulfill a promise to Solomon. It's not the promise that he made to Abraham, that he was going to bless the whole world. It's the promise that he made to Solomon, because he told Solomon, hey, Solomon, look, you're a great king, you're a wise king, but don't get too full of yourself, because in the day that you forsake me, in the day that you turn away from me and you worship the other gods, I'm going to divide the nation and I'm going to tear down the temple. So don't turn away from me. But Solomon ended up marrying all the wives of the nations that surrounded him, and he ended up worshiping the gods of the wives of the nations surrounding him. And in that day, God did what he said he's going to do. He divided the nation into two, and the temple was torn down. The nation was divided, the northern part was called Israel, the southern part was called Judah. Two different places of worship, two different kingdoms now. Their economy was cut in half. Their military strength was cut in half, so their economy, their military power was diminished. Culturally, they were separated, and now they had problems with the nations around them. And what at one time looked like the optimal opportunity for God to bless all the world through the people of God, Abraham's family, now they've lost that opportunity. And about 200 years after the nation is divided, the nation of Assyria begins to look at invading, and actually does invade Israel, the northern part. And when they do that, they conquer Israel, and they take the best and the brightest from Israel, and they bring them back to their country, and then they take others from other countries, and they bring them into Israel. And so for all intents and purposes, the northern kingdom, the northern part, the northern family of Abraham is destroyed. It's just destroyed. Their potential to be a blessing. In fact, their potential even to bless themselves is decreasing. It doesn't even look like they can take care of themselves. And I think what's probably, to me when I read the stories, what's probably interesting is from the perspective of the other nations, they're thinking, your God that you have been talking about isn't even taking care of you. Other nations now are destroying you. And in the midst of all of that happening, with Assyria coming in, invading Israel, and destroying the northern kingdom, this man named Isaiah is sent from God to speak to the people and to tell them this incredible thing, to remind them not only of Abraham's promise, but to make the promise even bigger. And this is what it says in Isaiah 49, right after the destruction of the kingdom of the north. I will make you a light, he says. This is what he's telling them. I'm going to make you a light for the Gentiles. Remember, Israel's collapsing, and Judah now is on the verge too, because Assyria is going to come to Judah. They're on the verge of being invaded. And Isaiah says, I'm going to make you a light to the Gentiles. To all the nations of the world, I'm going to make you light, that my salvation, that my wholeness, that my rescue, that my freedom might come to the ends of the very earth. I'm going to make you a light. I'm going to do something in your midst that will bring all the attention of the entire world to you once again. I'm going to do something that will illuminate all the darkness. Can you imagine them? They're going, we just got destroyed by Assyria in the north. And shortly after this prophecy, Assyria came in, they invaded Judah, and Judah became a vassal state of the Assyrian Empire. So the people are going, it doesn't even seem like you're taking care of us. How are we ever going to be a light that brings salvation to all the world, all the earth? And then 300 years goes, and there's just more chaos. We're getting to the end of this because there's only so much chaos we can take, right? So as more chaos happens, Babylon invades Judah, the southern kingdom. And when Babylon invades Judah and the southern kingdom, they come to the walls of the city. They begin to tear down the walls, which means the city is vulnerable. The people are vulnerable. They destroy the temple. That's the place of worship. That's like, somebody going into the place that symbolizes the presence of God, new God, and they desecrated it. They just destroyed it, and they made a mockery and a shame of it. And again, in the midst of this, God raises up another man to go and speak on behalf of him to the people. And so he raises up this last guy named Malachi. And Malachi comes, and you got to figure the people were going at this point, okay, God, he's just trying to, he's just saying this. I mean, I don't know if he's going to do it, but he's just trying to prop us up, make us feel good. This is, about 1,600 years after the promise was made to Abraham. And Malachi comes and he says, my name, on behalf of God, God says, my name will be great among the nations. From where the sun rises to where it sets. That means from the beginning to the end, all over the earth, my name will be great among the nations. To which you got to imagine the people were going, your name is not going to be great. Your name isn't even great here. You haven't even seemingly taken care of us. And the nations, they're not going to follow us because they don't think you've taken care of us. But God says, my name will be great, and in every place, prayer or incense and pure offering, which is just like prayer and praise, are offered. They will be brought to me. In every place where there is worship going on, there will be a remnant, there will be a group, there will be a tribe, there will be a people worshiping me because my name, I'm going to make sure this happens, my name will be made great in all the nations, says the Lord Almighty. In other words, God is saying to them, in the midst of both the northern and the southern kingdom being completely destroyed, my name will eventually be great in all the earth. Just like I promised Abraham, I am with you, I am part of your story, I will make sure it happens, even though at this particular point in time, it doesn't look like anything good can happen. So just real quick, Assyria has come in and destroyed. Babylon came in and destroyed. The Greeks under Alexander the Great had then conquered the Persians, who then came in and destroyed, and they were destroying as well. And then in 63 BC, this is just an interesting date, in 63 BC, Rome sent Pompey the Great, to Jerusalem, to Judah. And Pompey the Great conquered town after town after town after town until he ended up in Jerusalem. He broke through the walls of Jerusalem. He went in, and again, he desecrated the temple, destroyed the temple, and in that time, Jerusalem, Israel, Judah became annexed into Rome, and they became a Roman occupation. The Holy Land, which we now call the Holy Land, became occupied by Roman rule. They weren't even free on their own anymore. They were occupied by Roman rule. And it seems like God has fulfilled part of the promise. They become a great nation. But God has not fulfilled the other part of the promise, because how could this nation that is so now destroyed ever be a blessing to the rest of the world? And so it seems like, all the nations would not be blessed through Abraham. And it seems that they would not be a light to the Gentiles, and it doesn't seem like God will be worshipped around the world. And all of this is what makes this incredible story so incredible. In fact, in your life, if you're going, you know what, it's been a really rough year or a rough season, or as I look forward to my future, I don't know how much hope I really have, I want to encourage you that God sets this whole thing up. And even at times when it seems like he is totally absent and allowing all these things to happen, he's actually at work preparing a set time. He's actually at work behind the scenes setting this thing up for this incredible thing to happen. It reminds me of the scene, and I don't want to in any way trivialize this moment, but any of you saw Avengers, the Endgame? You know, see, there's less focus. Man, there's this scene at the end of the movie where Captain America he's just been beaten down. You know that scene? He gets up and he's just like, he's going to do it because he's committed to doing this thing, and he's a good guy, and so he straps on his shield, and he's just going to go, even if it means his death, and and then all of a sudden he hears, kind of broken up in his ear, somebody saying, Captain Sam, can you hear me? And then how many of you cried when you saw the portals open up? You saw the portals open up. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm spoiling it, but you got to go see it. Portals open up, and then the Black Panther and the tribe of Wakanda come through the portal. I mean, it seemed like there was no hope. Or some of you are going like, I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm sorry. You got to go watch it. I watched it the other day, and my tears were coming down my head. Shut my office because I'm crying as the Black Panther came through and looked at him. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then, wait, there are more portals coming. And all of a sudden you begin to feel big. There was no hope in Israel. This was done. But God was working behind the scenes. Trusting in God is not just this, I don't know what else to do, so I'll trust in God. No, you have good reason to hope in God. God made a promise to Abraham 2,000 years before Jesus ever came. And he said, Abraham, I'm going to make you a great nation, and I'm going to bless you. And I'm going to make you famous in all the earth, and you will be a blessing. Well, hey, we don't bless nations. No. I'm a God who's going to bless the whole world because I love the whole world. And I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you. I'm going to be a part of your story. And at the end of it, through me, all the peoples in the entire world, they will be blessed. And when the people of God had no hope, when Israel had no hope, and when they were in the worst place to be a blessing, as the Apostle Paul kind of looked back on this, this is what he said. He said, when the set time had fully come. When the set time had fully come. Dr. Strange knew what was going to happen. When the set time had fully come and things were at their worst and there was no hope. When the set time had fully come and Rome had become the occupying country and Roman and Greek culture were being exported throughout the world and there was a common language that allowed countries to communicate throughout the world. When the Romans had developed a highway system that was the most involved highway system. It's one of the reasons why we say all roads lead to Rome, because if you look at a topographical infrastructure architecturally of all the roads, they actually do lead to Rome. And in that world, all the Romes from all the places from Rome spread out. I mean, if you wanted to get people there and have communication go, this was the optimal time. Rome had developed a sophisticated port system to connect all the port hubs and all the port cities in the Mediterranean hub. You get what's happening here? God has developed Rome, given them a place, and developed all this at the appropriate time. And when the people had gotten tired of the old Greek myths and Roman gods and were looking for something that was real and that would satisfy their hearts, at the right time when God had developed a way for the light to come into an area and go all over the world, and for people and the message to go all over the world at the set time by God, God sent his Son. It was then that God sent his Son. 2,000 years in the making, and then God sent his Son, and his Son would die as a criminal in our place to pay the price for our rebellion and our sin. And in that death, God was showing that he was going to bless the entire world as he promised through Abraham, through the sacrifice, through the self-sacrifice and loving death of his Son, Jesus Christ, on our behalf. At the right time, at the set time, at God's time, when God had put everything in place just the way that he wanted it to be. At that time, God sent his Son to you and I. At that time, this is how the story reads. God sent his son Gabriel, sent an angel Gabriel to Nazareth, to a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph. At the right time, at the set time, a descendant of King David. And the virgin's name was Mary. Not only is Abraham known throughout the world, but if you go anywhere in the world, even Mary's name is known throughout the world. Throughout the world. And the angel went to her and he said, greetings, you who are highly favored. And this greeting is basically saying, greetings to you. You are being blessed. See, there were years. In fact, when the Bible closes and that guy Malachi last said, all throughout the world, the name of God is going to be great in worship, there was 400 years of silence. There are no other books after that book written in the Bible. It seems to be a period where God is just absent. And all of a sudden, God shows up on the scene and says, I promised to Abraham that I would bless all the world. And Mary, I'm coming back to you, and I'm going to start again with you. Blessed are you, Mary. I'm choosing you for this. The angel said to her, don't be afraid, Mary. You found favor with God. You found blessing with God. And you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you're to call his name Jesus. And he will be great, and he will be called Son of the Most High. And the Lord will give him the throne of his father David. And he will reign over Jacob's descendants, again, over the family of Abraham, over that nation that became a kingdom. He will reign over that forever. And the influence, the blessing of that kingdom, it will never end. And in the end, God did exactly what he said he was going to do through Abraham. He blessed the entire world. At the time when everything was exactly the way that God wanted it to be, at the set time, God gave us his son, who would die on a cross in our place. And that blessing continues to impact people every day, every day. In fact, that blessing impacted a friend of ours named Joni.
Probably in my early 30s, where I was going through some life changes and I was just feeling like I was walking on sinking sand. I was going through a divorce, and so I had to move back home to Chicago, just facing the reality of being a single mom. I think that, I was so overwhelmed with the situation that my body started to take its toll. So later on, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. My body started to reject any nutrition, and I was down to 89 pounds. And that's where I think my desperateness and completeness became, actually. So I reached out and I asked the question, where are you? And it was around February. I was running a fever. And I just laid on the snow just to cool down. And I believe that he touched me. I felt complete. I felt whole. I felt nourished, and above all, I felt so hopeful. I wanted to seek him in the most organic way. I wanted to go back to the roots, and so I started to attend synagogues. And the more I attended, the bigger Christ got. I have learned that there is no other safer place than that place where you're completely and utterly dependent on him. After 13 years of being a single mom, God blessed me with a beautiful man that I am now married to, and I couldn't be more blessed. There's always hope with Christ, there's always victory, and there's always just triumphance in his name.
I love the honest question she asked, and maybe you've asked it before, God, where are you? Like, where are you? This thing has been taking so long. You seem so quiet. You seem so absent. How could you possibly redeem the situation? And what we oftentimes don't realize is that God has always been there. He's working behind the scenes. And even when he seems inactive, he has not stopped working. And when he seems silent, it doesn't mean he's still. It doesn't mean he's not doing something. It means he wants us to continue hoping in him, hoping in him. He is a God who's faithful and he keeps his promises. He loves us tremendously. He doesn't just love us, the world. He loves you tremendously. He knows the intimate details of you. He didn't come just to be the Savior of the world. He came to be your Savior in your world, in your situation. He came for you. He came for me. He came for Joni. So I want to encourage you wherever you are. The Christmas story gives us incredible reason to hope in God, to continue putting your hope in God, to continue taking steps to follow and to love God. That's what it means to hope in him. It means to take steps to live as if what he said is going to happen is true. He said, I will forgive your past. He says, I will make it brand new. He says, in your present, I'll be with you. I'll make you a new person. I'll give you a new identity. I'll give you a new future. I'll give you a brand new purpose. And in the big future beyond this lifetime, God says, you'll be with me for all eternity. I go and I prepare a place for you, a place where you'll, with me, rule and reign like you were created to rule and reign. So God fulfilled his promise to Abraham, just like he wants to fulfill his promise to you and I. There's such great reason to hope. So the world needed hope. I think our world needs hope right now. I hear that. I hear that and I see that. What is the hope for the racial tensions that we have? What is the hope for the fear that we have? Worship team, come and join me. What is the hope? The hope is in our God. That's where the hope is.